Hey all you people out there, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Fen Hungstrom, and today in our edition of uncut, unedited, well no it's going to be edited, but uncut, unscripted, and unprofessional Fractured Space videos, we have the USR Pioneer. One of the starter ships of Fractured Space when it actually left early access back in, 2017, 2018? And for good reason. It's a very good starter ship because it is incredibly simple, and compared to the other two starter ships, the Sentinel and the Venturer, it doesn't really have a lot of mechanics that you have to study in depth to learn. I mean, you don't really have to do that about the Venturer or the Sentinel either, but the Sentinel and the Venturer require a bit more thought than the Pioneer does. And that's because the Pioneer is the damage dealer of the three. So if you look at this, so the Sentinel deals, obviously less damage, but it has way more maneuverability, so it's better to outmaneuver and outthink your enemy. Whereas the Venturer has way less attacking power, but it has more utility and more defense. Now the Pioneer is one of the best damage-dealing ships in the game for consistency, and also just raw damage. And we're going to be taking a look at its weapon systems, how it actually plays, its other stats, and what kind of crew loadout maybe you'd want to use, and also how you should try and position yourself in this. Now, I'm going to try and make this video a bit shorter than the Furion one. I've had a couple of takes of this already. Like I said, all these videos are completely unscripted because that's how I did them back when I was originally doing these videos, so why not? So I've had a couple of goes at this, and I think I know what I want to talk about to kind of go through. But it's going to be a little bit shorter than the Furion, but not a lot. But I'm going to try my best. So, let's get into it. First of all, it's 1,257 meters long, which is not short, but it's also not huge either. So, like, compared to the Punisher, it's shorter than the Punisher is. It's a little bit longer than the Reaper is. It's definitely shorter than the Sentinel. It's basically the same length as the Venturer. It's longer than the Brawler. But it's also not big and thick, if that makes any sense. Like, let's say if you look at the Venturer, which is about the same size, the Venturer has this huge profile all the way along the side. It has a huge front. Its back isn't that big. Like, back here, it's not that big. The Pioneer is more uniform in its shape, but it's also not small. It's not like a Raider, for example. It has 9,000 base hull strength, which, as we saw last time, is basically the standard for medium attack ships, or medium ships in general. So, that's the same as the Venturer, that's the same as the Sentinel, that's the same as basically most of the medium attack ships, so nothing out of the ordinary there. And it has an initial max speed of 599, which is kind of in the middle. So let's say if you look at the Venturer, a lot faster than the Venturer, nowhere near as fast. Actually, it's about the same as the Sentinel, but the Sentinel has speed boosting abilities. It's slower than a Reaper, it's faster than a Punisher is, it's faster than a Brawler, but it's also going to be slower than something like, let's say, where is it? That's about actually, no, it is about average. The Interceptor, where is it? There it is. It's going to be slower than something like the Interceptor, which is more or less a rushdown ship. So it's pretty good. One thing that these stats don't mention, though, is that the Pioneer's maneuvering and turn rate is exceptional. It's really good at turning, very good at maneuvering, strafing left and right, and going up and down. It's very good at all of its other maneuvering aspects, especially turning. It's surprisingly good at turning. Next up, the weapon systems. What things goes bang, 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 pew, 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 pew. You can definitely tell that these videos are unscripted with things like that. And also because it's, 1 o'clock in the morning, because I woke up at 11, because I went to bed at 4 when I came home from work. Anyway, getting back on track, your default weapon system, your primary weapon system that'll be dealing the most damage for you, are your void charges. These things are dangerous, to say the least. They have a max range of 12,000 meters, and an optimum range of 12,000 meters, meaning that you will deal maximum damage no matter what range you're at. These also have a small AoE effect, so about 1,000 meters past the optimum range, or the max range of 12,000 meters, you'll still do some damage, just not a lot. So your base damage is 48, and that's the impact damage, plus a 28 damage AoE effect from, well, not hitting enemies. The default void charges, they fire 8 charges per volley with a cooldown of 3.5 seconds. Now, these will not detonate at the range of an enemy. So, like, let's say they're at 8,000 meters, you have them targeted, you shoot these void charges. If you miss, they're just going to go sailing right past them. The only way that you can get that AoE damage only is if they're past your max range. So these will not detonate at the correct range away from an enemy. So just keep that in mind. Now, the other two options for your void charges for your primary weapon are either the light or heavy void charges, and these trade-offs are exceptionally simple. The heavy void charges are the less useful of the two in my opinion. They deal more impact and AoE damage, so okay, maybe the one situation I can see the heavy void charges being better at is if you're outside of your optimum or max range, and you just want to harass people with the AoE damage, but that's about it. You fire 2 less charges per volley, the base cooldown goes down to 3.2 seconds, and you deal more damage per shot. However, if you miss one of those shots, which is very likely because your projectile velocity goes down to 8,000 meters per second, down from 10,000, it's not great. You lose a lot more damage if you miss a single charge than the normal void charges. So ultimately, it's not that useful to have more impact damage. The ones that you should use are the light void charges, because these things, even though they deal slightly less damage, I mean slightly, they deal 8 less damage, you fire 2 more of them per volley. They have a shorter cooldown at 3.2 seconds. They have a faster velocity at 12,000 meters per second, so it only takes 1 second to travel their full travel distance. But also, you deal more damage per volley than the other two options, and you lose less damage if you miss 1 or 2 void charges of the volley. So it's the most consistent and the highest damage dealing option of the 3. So, and the most consistent to hit of the 3 as well, because it has the fastest velocity. Really, just take the light void charges. If you want to do the most damage and be the most consistent, but it's honestly up to you. I can't stop you from picking the other options, but I just prefer the light void charges because to me they just seem like they're the best option. Your right mouse button ability is the Gravity Nuke. This is a high impact, high pushback explosive charge that you fire from really far away. You can fire it from really far away. It has a max range of 24,000 meters. It does not have an optimum range because the optimum range is the blast radius when it gets to the target and explodes. It has a short wind-up time of 1.5 seconds before it actually shoots, and it has a base damage of 1,179 damage, plus a 25% slow effect for a few seconds after the explosion. It has a 1,000 meter blast radius and a 25-second cooldown. You will be using this a lot. It's good supplementary damage to your void charges when you have it active, and it's also really, really easy and consistent to land. If you have an enemy targeted and you shoot the Gravity Nuke, it will explode at the distance that the enemy is away from you. However, you do need to lead these shots because obviously it has a travel time. It travels at 6,000 meters per second. So lead your shots and it will explode at the correct distance and deal damage. And there's no damage fall off to the explosion radius. If anyone's caught within that 1,000 meter blast radius, they will take full damage and slow effect. The two other options for the Gravity Nuke are side grades. So the Gravity Nuke Blast deals around 400 damage less, but has doubled the blast radius. So, even as the tooltip says, it's useful for enemies flying in tight formation, mobilecraft, or dislodging those behind cover, because like I said, the Gravity Nuke has a strong pushback effect to the explosion. Enemy ships will get pushed pretty far away from the explosive radius. So making that radius bigger just makes it easier to push enemies apart from each other. And let's say if they're hiding behind an asteroid that's 1,999 meters thick, but yet they're within the 2,000 meter blast radius, well, they're still going to take the full damage, they're still going to take pushback from it. Now, it might just be a UI error, but it doesn't say anything about the slow effect, so I think that there's no slow effect on this one. But that might just be, again, a UI error. It might also still apply a slow effect. I haven't tested it out yet. Maybe I'll put a little message on screen letting you guys know. But this is the one that I use, the Plasma Gravity Nuke. This is the one that I use. The Plasma Gravity Nuke. This is the one that I use. The Plasma Gravity Nuke. This is the one that I use. The Plasma Gravity Nuke. This is the one that I use. The Plasma Gravity Nuke. This is the one that I use. The Plasma Gravity Nuke. This is the one that I use. The Plasma Gravity Nuke. This is the one that I use. The Plasma Gravity Nuke. This is the one that I use. The Plasma Gravity Nuke. This is the one that I use. The Plasma Gravity Nuke. This is the one that I use. The Plasma Gravity Nuke. This is the one that I use. The Plasma Gravity Nuke. This is the one that I use. The Plasma Gravity Nuke. This is the one that I use. The Plasma Gravity Nuke. This is the one that I use. The Plasma Gravity Nuke. This is the one that I use. The Plasma Gravity Nuke. This is the one that I use. So again, in exchange for losing about 400 impact damage, you gain some of that damage back. You gain 300 damage back in plasma damage. But the blast radius goes back down to 1,000 meters, and you also gain back the slow effect. Now, I'm gonna be inclined to say that the gravity nuke blast also has that slow effect to it. So this is useful in a few situations. It's useful for dealing with heavily armored ships because plasma damage is absolute. It goes through armor, it ignores armor, and it deals direct damage to health. So that 300 damage is not affected by armor values in the slightest. And it's also useful for dealing with enemies that are hiding behind forward station shields, or are being healed by allies, or are in their home base, because plasma damage, or any sort of damage over time, prevents you from being healed effectively, because every single damage tick resets a healing counter, so you won't be healed for a short duration after taking some damage. So that plasma prevents them from being healed effectively by pretty much any means. And finally, it helps for dealing with stealth ships. So if an enemy is hit with a plasma proc, they will not be able to cloak effectively. The second they try and cloak, they'll take damage from plasma, and they'll decloak immediately, pretty much. So it's useful in those three situations. And it's also just better to have that damage back as plasma, because you're dealing more damage per second with that plasma ticking down enemy health. So overall, the plasma gravity nuke will deal more damage than the normal gravity nuke will, because that damage ignores armor. Your first utility ability is Reveal Sector. This is very simple. It does exactly what it says. You push 1, it has a short wind-up time, and then it will reveal any non-cloaked enemy ships in the sector. If an enemy ship is cloaked, nothing happens to them. This is exceptionally useful, and I know I keep saying that word, but it is really useful, that the Pioneer is alone or has a support ship with it, and it has to go forward. Just knowing what's out there, maybe hiding behind cover somewhere, is useful, because no matter how far back the enemy is in the sector, you're still going to be able to see where they are, except if they're cloaked, obviously. However, you do have a solution to cloaked ships, which we'll get into in a little bit. Next up, your missiles. These are a mixed bag. They are useful for supplementary damage at mid to close range, and if the enemy's point defense is being distracted by something else. But they're really weird missiles. So, for one thing, they're slow. They travel at 1,800 meters per second, which is slow. They fire really slowly as well, so the fire rate of the missiles after you push 2, they fire out really slowly, so they reach the target kind of one after another, except instead of being sort of focused and all arriving at about the same time. And they're radial missiles, so they fire in a ring around the ship, but the actual launch points of the missiles from the radius of the ship is weird. So you'll see it in the footage. It's weird. You just have to pay attention to the firing pattern. The last missile's fired out the top. It's weird. However, to compensate, these missiles deal more damage than most missiles in the game at 180 base, and they also, in my experience, have more health. They're harder to shoot down than other missiles in the game as well. So they do have some benefits to being so slow and awkward to use. And they also have a longer cooldown than most missiles at 30 seconds. So yeah, it's a mixed bag, but they are still useful. Use them whenever you can, but use them at closer ranges instead of longer ranges, because at longer ranges, they're more of just an annoyance. Use them on enemies that have their point defense distracted by fighters, bombers, other missiles, other ships, all that good stuff. And finally, your last utility ability is a detection buoy. It has a radius of 7,500 meters, and remember, that's the radius, so that's if you start at the center point where the buoy is, that's in any direction away from the buoy. So, technically speaking, this thing has a 15,000 meter effective area in a sphere that it will be able to cover, which is huge. Every 15 seconds, it will send out a detect pulse that will detect enemy ships, which, if you don't know, detection essentially means that stealth ships cannot cloak. If they're cloaked, a detection proc will make them uncloak, and they can't cloak for as long as the detection proc is on them. And that detection effect lasts for 5 seconds. The other two options basically trade off radius and detection frequency. So in exchange for 750 meters of radius, you gain 4 seconds faster detection frequency. So instead of 15 seconds, it's 11 seconds. The effect duration and the cooldown are exactly the same. Or you gain 1125 extra meters, right? Is that how that works? Yeah. You gain 1125 extra meters of radius. However, the detection frequency goes down to 18 seconds, or goes up to 18 seconds. It gets worse. Sorry about that, got distracted, so we'll just go ahead and edit that entire part out. Where was I? Oh, yeah. So you're trading detection frequency for radius, and remember that's the radius. So the diameter of the sphere is going to be way, way bigger. I prefer the improved radius over the improved detection frequency just because it creates a wider zone where stealth ships can't go without risk of being detected. And finally, we have point defense. Never take automated point defense, always take manual point defense. Even though it's a bit more of a pain to manage, automated point defense basically doesn't do anything against missiles or squadrons or other ships, so just take manual point defense and get used to pushing a button every time that missiles or squadrons come in. Next up, crew. Now this is completely subjective, except for one thing, but crew is pretty much whatever you want to improve on a ship. So you could basically trade out any of these crew members for anyone else, but I've taken a mix between armor strength and forward thrust, just because more armor strength is useful, more forward thrust is useful, especially because the Pioneer is already pretty quick, so making it faster is useful. I've taken better turn rate, because, again, the Pioneer already turns really well. Improving it further, it just makes sense to me. Maneuvering, it already maneuvers pretty well, so I don't really need to improve it as much, but, again, you could make a case for either way. For the captain, attack damage and damage reduction over more capture rate, just more attack damage, really. I mean, you could make a case for doing something like a 5% damage increase. There is no 5% damage increase, so never mind. But you could do something like capture rate, or more damage reduction for less capture rate, but I like to have a healthy balance, but having definitely the most attack damage. Mix between fire rate and turret traverse, just because the Pioneer's turret traverse is okay, but being faster definitely can't hurt. So, you know, let's say if a light attack ship gets close to you, it's just better to have more turret traverse, but also having some fire rate. And then finally, armor repair rate and broken armor damage. I'm probably going to switch this out for more broken armor damage negation, just because that's usually more useful, especially on a ship like the Pioneer, which doesn't have a lot of armor to begin with. Just helping survive situations where you lose a lot of your armor facings is going to be helpful. So, yeah, again, you can make a case for changing any of these out for anything, for any other crew members, except for CAGs. CAGs are completely pointless on the Pioneer because you don't have any squadrons, so these two bonuses are completely useless to you, except if you want a meme, which I can't stop you if you want to. Go right ahead. The only other one that I'm not really too sure of is energy efficiency and utility cooldown. Energy efficiency, your abilities don't really use a lot of energy. Point defense does, so I mean, I guess if you want to do energy efficiency for point defense reasons. But utility cooldowns, if you look at the utilities, the reveal sector and detection buoy both have 90-second cooldowns. You really shouldn't be using them more than every 90 seconds. Except maybe if your detect buoy gets destroyed, in which case, sure. But there are better ships that have better detect abilities, so just utility cooldown isn't that useful for the Pioneer. Neither is energy efficiency. Alright, and that pretty much covers most of the actual on-paper statistics, so how should you play the Pioneer? Well, I can immediately tell you that you do not want to play this thing as a frontline tank. You don't have the armor or the health to survive very long under focus fire. You're not a Colossus, for example. However, if you are forced to fight alone against a fleet of enemy ships, like 2 or 3, you deal enough damage where you can take 1 or 2 of them with you before going down, because that's just how much damage the Pioneer can do. And it has just enough armor and just enough health to manage it, but that's not ideal. You know, if you can trade 2 ships for 1, if you trade your ship for 2 enemy ships, that's a pretty good trade, but you just want to try and avoid dying in the first place. But again, if enemies decide to take you on, you're going to show them very quickly that the Pioneer can dish out a serious slapping. So just, if you're approaching a Pioneer, be careful. It does lose in close-range combat to a lot of other medium attack ships, like the Furion, the Brawler, the Reaper. Sometimes, if the Pioneer can get around the Reaper, though, the Reaper's gonna be in trouble. You will lose to long-range ships, because while your range is good for mid to close range, it's not good for long range. The Gravity Nuke and the missiles are okay at long range, but you're not going to deal as much damage as you need to. Which means that the Pioneer fits into this very nice niche of a second-line attack damage dealer, of a support damage dealer. If you have a heavier ship in front of you, and they're taking a lot of the fire and they're taking a lot of damage, well, you deal so much damage that if the enemy team doesn't switch fire to you, you're going to take out multiple enemy ships before they can deal with you. Because you just deal so much damage so quickly. And if you're not being shot at, you're essentially just dealing free damage. You're just farming the enemy at that point. I'm sure that you've seen in the background footage, this thing will rip apart anything that gets in front of it. With no mercy. It deals a lot of damage for a medium attack ship. Very consistent damage at medium range, which not a lot of ships have that role in this game. Most of them are either close, or they're long range, or they have damage fall off, or they have abilities that are specifically tuned to close range, like the Furion or the Brawler, or long range, like the Watchman or the Guardian and stuff like that. The Pioneer fits in a very nice niche, where it's kind of all over. You don't have to be locked to close range, and you don't have to be locked to mid-range, but you have a lot of options. You're very versatile, and also you deal a lot of damage, which is very useful, which is why this is a great starting ship, and why maybe I should have looked at one of the starting ships as my first review, but, I'm looking at it now, so why not? And thank you, person who recommended this, to look at the Pioneer, because playing the Pioneer and getting footage and everything, I forgot how fun this ship was. But yeah, that's really about it. I hope that you all enjoyed the video. Next up, I think we're going to be doing the Protector next, because we've done 2 medium attack ships, one from Zarek and one from USR. I think it's time we give Titan Defense Systems a look, and I think a healing ship would be nice to look at. It was either this or the Paladin, but the Paladin I hate. I hate the Paladin with a burning passion, which maybe we'll do the Paladin next, just so I can explain why this thing is meh. maybe I've just upset somebody by saying that, but that's my opinion. But yeah, we'll do a healing ship next. I think it's going to be the Protector next, actually, because the Protector's fun. But yeah, that's about it. So I hope that you all enjoyed the video. I will see you all in the next review. If you have any suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.